In the golden halls of Eldermont Palace, where centuries of tradition ruled every breath and gesture, Queen Isabella thought she knew exactly what would bring peace to her fractured family. But, when she handed Princess Elena a simple wooden box on her 25th birthday, she had no idea she was about to unleash a secret that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom. What lay inside that innocent-looking gift would turn brother against father, reveal long-buried truths, and force King Edmund to confront the most dangerous decision of his reign. Some gifts, it turns out, come with a price no royal treasury could ever afford. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Eldermont Palace as Princess Elena walked through the corridors she had known all her life. Today was different, though. Today marked her 25th birthday, and, with it came responsibilities that would change everything about her carefully structured world. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders like the heavy ceremonial robes she would wear later for the celebration. Queen Isabella stood in her private chambers, holding a wooden box that had been hidden in her personal vault for over 2 decades. Her hands trembled slightly as she ran her fingers over the intricate carvings on its surface. This box contained more than just a birthday gift. It held the power to either heal their family or destroy it completely. She had wrestled with this decision for months, knowing that once opened, there would be no going back. The relationship between Elena and her stepbrother Prince Marcus had grown increasingly strained over the past year. Marcus, who was next in line to the throne, had become distant and cold toward Elena ever since their father King Edmund had begun including her in more royal duties. The tension in the palace was palpable, with servants whispering in corners and advisors choosing sides carefully. Isabella knew that something had to be done before the rift became irreparable. King Edmund had been preparing for the birthday celebration with his usual attention to detail, but those close to him noticed the worry lines deepening around his eyes. He loved both his children deeply, but the political pressures of running a kingdom often forced him to make choices that favored tradition over family harmony. Marcus was his heir, trained from birth to rule, while Elena had always been seen as the spare, important but secondary. The palace buzzed with activity as preparations for the evening's grand celebration continued. Hundreds of guests from neighboring kingdoms would attend, along with nobles, dignitaries, and important citizens of their realm. The kitchen staff worked tirelessly to prepare an elaborate feast, while decorators transformed the great hall into a spectacular venue worthy of a royal birthday. Yet beneath all this grandeur, a storm was brewing that no one could see coming. Elena spent the morning in her favorite garden, trying to find peace among the roses and lavender that reminded her of simpler times. She thought about her childhood when she and Marcus had been inseparable, building forts in the palace gardens and sharing secrets late into the night. Those days seemed like a distant dream now, replaced by formal interactions and careful political maneuvering that left her feeling isolated and alone. The princess had always been different from other royals. While Marcus excelled at military strategy and diplomatic negotiations, Elena showed an unusual interest in the common people of their kingdom. She often disguised herself to walk among the citizens, learning about their struggles and dreams. This compassion had earned her the love of the people but sometimes put her at odds with traditional royal expectations. As the day progressed, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Call it intuition or simply the weight of turning 25 in a royal family, but she sensed that this birthday would mark a turning point in her life. She had no idea how right she would prove to be, or how dramatically her world was about to change. Queen Isabella made her final decision as afternoon shadows began to lengthen. She would give Elena the box during the private family celebration, before the grand public festivities began. It was time for the truth to come to light, regardless of the consequences. She only hoped that her family would survive what was about to unfold. The wooden box sat on Isabella's dressing table, innocuous and beautiful, carved with symbols that most people would assume were merely decorative. But Isabella knew better. Each symbol told part of a story that had been carefully hidden for 25 years, a story that would explain so much about Elena's character and abilities, and would finally answer questions that had puzzled the royal family since Elena's birth. As evening approached and the time for the family gathering drew near, each member of the royal family prepared themselves for what they thought would be a typical birthday celebration. None of them realized that within hours, everything they believed about their family, their kingdom, and themselves would be called into question. The wooden box held more than just a gift, it contained the power to rewrite history itself. The stage was set for a revelation that would echo through the halls of Eldermont Palace for generations to come. As servants lit candles throughout the castle and guests began to arrive, Queen Isabella took a deep breath and prepared to change everything with a single act of courage. The birthday celebration was about to become something none of them would ever forget. Elena's 25th birthday was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a celebration of her journey from child to accomplished young woman. Instead, it would become the day that divided her family and set in motion events that would threaten the very stability of the kingdom. The wooden box waited patiently, holding its secrets just a little longer, until the moment when everything would be revealed and nothing would ever be the same again. The private family celebration began in the blue drawing room, an intimate space reserved for the most personal royal gatherings. Soft candlelight flickered off the silk wallpaper as King Edmund, Queen Isabella, Prince Marcus, and Princess Elena gathered around a small table laden with Elena's favorite foods. The atmosphere should have been warm and loving, but an undercurrent of tension ran through the room like an electrical charge waiting to spark. Elena wore a simple but elegant emerald dress that brought out the unusual color of her eyes, a shade that had always puzzled courtiers and artists who tried to capture her likeness. She smiled graciously as she opened the traditional gifts, a pearl necklace from her father, an ancient book of poetry from Marcus, and a beautiful silk scarf from the palace staff. Each gift was lovely, but she could sense that the real moment had not yet arrived. Queen Isabella sat rigidly in her chair, the wooden box hidden beneath the table on her lap. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. She watched Elena laugh at something King Edmund said, noting how the young woman's entire face lit up with genuine joy. Soon, that innocent happiness might be replaced with confusion, anger, or worse. But it was too late to turn back now. Prince Marcus observed the scene with growing impatience. He had important matters to discuss with his father regarding trade negotiations with the neighboring kingdom of Westmarch, and these family obligations felt like an unnecessary delay. At 27, he had little patience for what he saw as frivolous celebrations, especially when real political work awaited. He failed to notice the meaningful glances passing between his father and stepmother. King Edmund tried to maintain his usual composed demeanor, but those who knew him well could see the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his wineglass. He had been privy to Isabella's plan, though he had tried to dissuade her from this course of action. Some secrets, he believed, were better left buried. But Isabella had been adamant, and now they would all have to live with the consequences. The conversation flowed around topics of court life, upcoming diplomatic missions, and Elena's charitable work with the kingdom's orphanages. Elena spoke passionately about her latest project to improve education for common children, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Marcus listened with polite disinterest, while King Edmund nodded approvingly but seemed distracted by weightier thoughts. As the meal drew to a close, Queen Isabella finally stood, her legs unsteady beneath her elaborate gown. "Elena, my dear, I have one final gift for you. Something very special that I have been keeping for this exact moment." Her voice carried a strange quality that made everyone look up with sudden attention. Even Marcus set down his wineglass, sensing that something important was about to happen. Elena clapped her hands together with delight, always genuinely appreciative of thoughtful gestures. "Oh, Isabella, you've already done so much for this celebration. You really didn't need to get me anything else." She had grown to love her stepmother deeply over the years, appreciating the woman's kindness and wisdom in navigating the complexities of royal life. Isabella's hands shook as she lifted the wooden box and placed it gently on the table before Elena. "This gift comes with a story, my dear. A story that I should have told you years ago, but I was waiting for the right moment. I believe that moment has finally arrived." The room fell completely silent, even the usual sounds of the palace seeming to fade away. Elena examined the box carefully, running her fingers over the intricate carvings with growing fascination. The symbols seemed to tell a story, though she couldn't quite understand their meaning. There were images of stars, trees, flowing water, and what appeared to be a crowned figure surrounded by light. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly the work of a master artisan. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, genuinely moved by the obvious care that had gone into creating such a piece. "But I can sense there's more to this than just a lovely box. These symbols, they seem familiar somehow, though I can't place where I might have seen them before." She looked up at Isabella with questioning eyes, noting the tears that had begun to form in the older woman's eyes. King Edmund cleared his throat nervously, while Marcus leaned forward with sudden interest. There was something about the box that seemed to command attention, as if it held an energy all its own. The room felt charged with anticipation, though no one quite understood why a simple wooden container should have such an effect. "Open it, my dear," Isabella said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But, know that once you do, everything will change. The truth has a way of reshaping our understanding of the world, and this truth is bigger than any of us anticipated when we chose to keep it hidden." She glanced at King Edmund, who nodded gravely, though his expression suggested he still harbored doubts about this revelation. Elena's fingers found the small brass clasp that held the box closed. It opened easily, as if it had been waiting patiently for this moment for many years. Inside, nestled in dark blue velvet, lay a silver pendant unlike anything she had ever seen. The metal seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and the design incorporated the same symbols that decorated the box's exterior. But it was more than just the pendant that captured Elena's attention. Beneath it lay a folded piece of parchment, sealed with wax that bore an unfamiliar coat of arms. The seal depicted a tree with roots that extended deep into the earth and branches that reached toward a circle of stars. Elena had never seen this symbol before, yet something about it stirred a deep recognition within her soul. "What is this?" Elena asked, her voice filled with wonder and growing confusion. She lifted the pendant carefully, gasping as it seemed to warm in her hands. The silver metal felt alive somehow, pulsing gently against her palm like a heartbeat. "I've never seen anything like it. Where did you get this, and why are you giving it to me?" Isabella took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything forever. "That pendant belonged to your birth mother, Elena. And that letter will tell you who you really are, and why you have always felt different from the rest of us." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, leaving everyone stunned into silence. The implications of Isabella's statement began to sink in slowly. Elena stared at the pendant in her hands, her mind reeling with confusion and disbelief. Marcus sat frozen in his chair, while King Edmund buried his face in his hands. The careful order of their family was about to be completely upended, and there would be no going back to the comfortable lives they had all lived with for so long. The silence that followed Isabella's revelation stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Elena's hands trembled as she held the silver pendant, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. "My birth mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I thought, you always said she died in childbirth and that we didn't speak of her because it was too painful for father." King Edmund finally lifted his head from his hands, his face pale and drawn. "Elena, we need to explain everything to you. But first, perhaps you should read the letter. It will help you understand the full scope of what we've kept hidden from you all these years." His voice carried the weight of decades of carefully guarded secrets. Marcus leaped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "What are you talking about? Elena is my sister, the daughter of King Edmund and Queen Sarah. What is this nonsense about a birth mother and mysterious pendants?" His voice rose with each word, confusion and anger warring for dominance in his expression. Isabella moved to stand beside Elena's chair, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Marcus, please sit down. This concerns you too, though perhaps not in the way you might expect." She turned back to Elena with tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "My dear, you are not King Edmund's biological daughter. You were brought to us when you were just 3 days old, under circumstances that we swore we would never reveal." Elena's world tilted on its axis as she stared at the letter in her hands. Everything she had believed about herself, her family, her very identity, was suddenly called into question. With shaking fingers, she broke the ancient wax seal and unfolded the parchment, revealing elegant handwriting in a script she had never seen before. The letter was written in the old language, but Elena found she could read it perfectly despite never having studied those particular characters. This realization sent another shock through her system even as she began to comprehend the words before her. "My beloved daughter," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then the time has come for you to learn the truth about your heritage and your destiny." As Elena read, her face grew progressively paler. The letter spoke of a hidden kingdom beyond the great mountains, a place where magic still flowed through the land and its people possessed abilities that the ordinary world had long forgotten. It told of a royal line that had protected these secrets for centuries, and of a daughter who had been sent away to ensure her survival when dark forces threatened to destroy everything. "This can't be real," Elena murmured, though even as she spoke, something deep inside her recognized the truth in those ancient words. Magic doesn't exist. These are just stories, fairy tales told to children. But the pendant in her other hand pulsed with warmth that seemed to flow through her entire being, awakening something that had always been there but never acknowledged. Marcus began pacing frantically around the room. "This is madness. You're telling us that Elena isn't really part of our family? That she's some sort of magical princess from a fairy tale kingdom? Father, surely you can't believe any of this nonsense." He stopped directly in front of King Edmund's chair, demanding answers with his eyes. King Edmund stood slowly, his age seeming to weigh heavily on his shoulders. 25 years ago, in the darkest hour of the night, strangers came to our castle. They carried a newborn baby and a story so incredible that I nearly turned them away. But there was something about that child, something that convinced me she needed our protection. We had just lost Queen Sarah and our own newborn daughter in childbirth. The timing seemed like more than mere coincidence. Elena looked up from the letter, her emerald eyes now shimmering with unshed tears. "The letter says that my birth mother was Queen Lyralii of the hidden kingdom of Etheresia. It says that a dark sorcerer named Malachar had sworn to destroy the royal bloodline, and that I was sent away to keep me safe until I was old enough to reclaim my heritage." Her voice grew stronger as she continued reading. "It says that on my 25th birthday, I would begin to manifest the abilities that are my birthright." As if summoned by her words, the pendant suddenly blazed with silver light that filled the entire room. Everyone gasped and stepped back, except for Elena, who remained seated as the light seemed to flow into her body. For a moment, her eyes glowed with the same silver radiance as the pendant, and, when the light faded, something fundamental had changed about her presence. Isabella wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the transformation. "We've seen signs over the years, small things that we told ourselves were just coincidences. The way plants seemed to grow more vibrantly in your garden, how animals were drawn to you, the dreams you described of places that didn't exist in our world. We always knew this day would come." Elena set the letter down carefully, her mind reeling with implications she was only beginning to understand. "If this is true, if I really am from this Etheresia place, what does that mean for our family? For the kingdom? Marcus is still heir to the throne, nothing changes that." She looked at her stepbrother with pleading eyes, hoping to bridge the growing chasm between them. But Marcus's expression had hardened into something cold and calculating. "Everything changes, Elena. Don't you understand? If people learn about this, they'll question the legitimacy of our entire royal line. They'll wonder what other secrets we've been keeping. This could destabilize everything our family has worked centuries to build." His voice carried an edge that Elena had never heard before. King Edmund moved to the window, gazing out at the kingdom he had ruled for over 3 decades. "The letter mentions a prophecy, doesn't it? About what Elena is destined to do when her powers fully awaken." His voice was heavy with the burden of knowledge he had carried alone for too long. Elena nodded, returning to the final paragraph of the letter with growing trepidation. "It says that when the heir of Etheresia comes of age, she must choose between 2 paths. She can remain in the ordinary world, suppressing her abilities and living as a normal person, or she can return to claim her birthright and restore balance to both kingdoms. But it also says..." She paused, her voice catching in her throat. "What does it say?" Isabella asked gently, though her expression suggested she feared the answer. Elena's voice was barely a whisper as she read the final lines. "It says that Malachar still lives, that his power has only grown stronger in the years since my exile. If I choose to reclaim my heritage, I will inherit not just a throne, but also a war that has been waiting 25 years for my return. The fate of both kingdoms may depend on the choice I make in the coming days." The room fell silent again as the full magnitude of the situation became clear. Elena wasn't just a princess discovering her true parentage, she was a key player in a conflict that could reshape the very nature of their world. The innocent birthday celebration had become the catalyst for events that would test the bonds of family, loyalty, and love in ways none of them could have imagined. As the evening shadows deepened around them, each member of the royal family grappled with their new reality. The wooden box that had started it all sat empty on the table, having fulfilled its purpose of revealing a truth that would change everything. Outside, the grand birthday celebration awaited, with hundreds of guests expecting to honor Princess Elena. But the woman who would greet them would be someone entirely different from the person who had awakened that morning. The grand ballroom of Eldermont Palace had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the walls, while thousands of white roses adorned every surface, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Nobles from across the realm mingled in their finest attire, jewels glittering in the soft light as conversations and laughter echoed through the vast space. Yet despite the splendor surrounding her, Elena felt as though she were observing the scene from a great distance. She stood at the top of the grand staircase in a stunning silver gown that Isabella had commissioned months earlier, not knowing how prophetically appropriate the color would prove to be. The pendant from her birth mother hung around her neck, hidden beneath the fabric but pulsing gently against her skin with a warmth that reminded her constantly of her new reality. Every few minutes, she would catch glimpses of light flickering at the edges of her vision, as if the world was revealing layers she had never noticed before. King Edmund made the traditional birthday address, speaking eloquently about Elena's contributions to the kingdom and her bright future ahead. But Elena noticed the careful way he chose his words, avoiding any mention of royal succession or inheritance. Marcus stood beside the throne, resplendent in his military dress uniform, though his smile seemed forced and his eyes kept darting nervously toward his stepsister. The revelation from earlier that evening had created an invisible barrier between the family members that everyone could sense but no one could explain. Servants whispered among themselves about the tension they observed, while courtiers noted the unusual dynamic between the royals. Several astute nobles approached Elena to comment that she seemed different somehow, more radiant and commanding than they had ever seen her. As Elena descended the stairs to join the celebration, she became increasingly aware of abilities that seemed to be awakening within her. She could sense the emotions of people around her as clearly as if they were speaking their feelings aloud. The ambassador from Northlands was worried about grain shortages in his region, while Lady Catherine harbored secret resentment about her daughter not being chosen for the royal court. Most disturbing of all, Elena could feel genuine hatred radiating from someone in the crowd, though she couldn't identify its source. The traditional birthday dance began with Elena partnering with various nobles in order of precedence. But, as she moved through the formal steps, she found herself unconsciously weaving patterns with her movements that seemed to create gentle currents of air around the dance floor. Candle flames flickered in rhythm with her steps, and several guests later commented that they felt unusually energized and happy during the dancing. Prince Marcus claimed his traditional dance with Elena midway through the evening, but their interaction was stiff and uncomfortable. As they moved together, Elena could sense his internal struggle between the love he had always felt for her and his fear of what her new identity might mean for his future. "We need to talk privately after this is over," he whispered during a turn, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Of course, Elena replied, though she was already dreading the conversation. She could feel his anger building like storm clouds, and she suspected that her newfound abilities were somehow making it worse. The pendant seemed to pulse more urgently whenever Marcus was near, as if warning her of some approaching danger. The evening's festivities continued with elaborate entertainments, including musicians, acrobats, and storytellers from across the kingdom. But, during the performance of an ancient ballad about a lost princess who returned to save her people, Elena noticed several guests exchanging meaningful glances. She began to wonder if her story wasn't as secret as her adoptive family had believed. Isabella stayed close to Elena throughout the evening, ostensibly playing the role of proud stepmother but actually serving as a protective guardian. She had noticed the same undercurrent of tension that Elena felt, and her maternal instincts were on high alert. Several times, she intercepted conversations that seemed to be heading toward uncomfortable questions about Elena's background or unusual presence that evening. As midnight approached, King Edmund announced the final surprise of the evening, a private fireworks display in the palace gardens. The guests moved outside in a festive procession, but Elena lingered in the ballroom, suddenly overcome by a vision that stopped her in her tracks. She saw herself standing in a completely different palace, one made of white stone and surrounded by forests that glowed with their own inner light. In the vision, she wore a crown of silver and starlight, and at her side stood figures she somehow recognized despite never having met them. The vision ended abruptly when Marcus appeared beside her.
"Elena, we need to talk now, before Father and Isabella return."
His voice carried an urgency that made her immediately alert. "There are things happening tonight that you don't understand, consequences to this revelation that go far beyond our family." Elena followed him to a small antechamber off the main ballroom, noting how his formal demeanor had cracked to reveal genuine fear underneath.
"Marcus, what's wrong? You're scaring me."
But, even as she asked, she was becoming aware of hostile presences moving through the palace, people who shouldn't be there and whose intentions felt dark and dangerous. Marcus closed the door behind them and turned to face her with an expression of anguish.
"Elena, I've done something terrible.
When Isabella first told me about this planned revelation, I thought I was protecting our kingdom by ensuring certain people knew about it in advance. I contacted Lord Aldrich, thinking he should be prepared for any political ramifications." His voice broke as he continued. "But Aldrich has connections I didn't know about, communications with other kingdoms that I never suspected." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as the implications of his words sank in.
"What are you telling me, Marcus? Who did Aldrich contact?"
But she was already beginning to understand, the pendant around her neck growing cold with warning.
"There are people here tonight who aren't from our kingdom, Elena. People who have been searching for you for 25 years. Lord Aldrich sent word to agents of someone called Malachar, thinking he could use the information to strengthen political alliances.
He didn't understand that he was essentially sending them a map to find you." Marcus's face was pale with horror at what he had unknowingly set in motion.
Before Elena could respond, the lights in the antechamber began to flicker and dim.
Outside, she could hear screams beginning to rise from the garden where the guests had gathered for the fireworks. The pendant against her chest suddenly blazed with heat, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that her peaceful life in Eldermont Palace had just come to an abrupt and violent end. Through the tall windows, they could see dark figures moving across the palace grounds, figures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The promised fireworks display had become something far more sinister, as explosions of a very different kind began to illuminate the night sky. Elena's worst fears were being realized as the war she had hoped to avoid was coming directly to her doorstep. Marcus grabbed her hand desperately.
"Elena, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen.
I thought I was protecting our kingdom, but I've endangered everyone we care about." His voice carried the weight of a decision that he knew he could never undo.
Elena squeezed his hand in return, feeling her new abilities surge through her in response to the approaching danger.
"We'll face this together, Marcus.
Family doesn't end because of bloodlines or mistakes.
But, right now, we need to find Father and Isabella and get everyone to safety." As she spoke, silver light began to emanate from her skin, and she finally understood that her choices had been made for her. The war had found her, and she would have to become the princess that Etheresia needed her to be. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the palace as dark forces breached the building, hunting for the lost princess who had just discovered her true identity. Elena's birthday celebration was about to become a battle that would determine the fate of two kingdoms, and she was no longer the sheltered royal daughter who had awakened that morning. The real test of her courage and her heritage was about to begin. The palace erupted into chaos as dark-cloaked figures materialized in the hallways, their presence seeming to drain warmth and light from everything around them. Elena could hear the screams of terrified guests echoing from the gardens, punctuated by the sound of clashing steel as the palace guards engaged these mysterious invaders. The pendant around her neck now blazed so brightly that its silver light shone through her gown, marking her as clearly as a beacon in the darkness.
Marcus drew his ceremonial sword, though Elena could sense his fear that the ornamental weapon would be useless against supernatural foes.
"We have to reach the safe room behind Father's study," he said urgently, but even as he spoke, shadows began seeping under the door of their hiding place.
"Elena, whatever happens, don't let them take you alive. These aren't ordinary soldiers."
But Elena was no longer the frightened young woman who had learned of her heritage just hours earlier. The pendant's power was flowing through her now, awakening abilities that felt both foreign and completely natural. She raised her hand, and silver light streamed from her palm, pushing back the encroaching shadows with such force that the dark figures beyond the door recoiled with inhuman shrieks. "I won't run anymore, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying a new authority that made him stare at her in amazement. "These people have come here because of me, which means our family and our guests are in danger because of who I am. I can't hide behind others when I have the power to fight back." The silver light around her intensified, and Marcus could swear he saw images of trees and stars flickering within its radiance. They burst from the antechamber together, Elena's light clearing a path through the supernatural darkness that had invaded the palace. They found King Edmund and Queen Isabella in the great hall, standing back to back as they directed the evacuation of panicking nobles. Edmund wielded an ancient sword that Elena had never seen before, one that glowed with its own inner fire, while Isabella seemed to be weaving some kind of protective barrier around the fleeing civilians. "Father, Isabella!" Elena called out, her voice somehow carrying over the din of battle. Both rulers turned toward her, relief flooding their faces when they saw she was safe. But that relief turned to amazement as they took in her transformed appearance, the way silver light seemed to emanate from her very being. "Elena, you need to get to safety," King Edmund shouted as he parried a strike from a shadow creature that barely seemed solid. "These are servants of Malachar. They've come to either capture you or destroy you, and we won't let either happen." His sword flared brighter as he spoke, revealing that he possessed secrets of his own. But Elena was already moving past them, drawn by an instinct she didn't fully understand toward the heart of the battle. In the center of the great hall stood a figure that commanded all the other dark beings, a tall man in robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of night itself. When he turned to look at her, his eyes burned with cold fire, and Elena knew she was looking at Malachar himself. "So, the lost princess finally reveals herself," Malachar said, his voice carrying across the battlefield with unnatural clarity. 25 years I have searched for you, 25 years I have waited to complete what I began when I destroyed your birth parents and their pathetic kingdom. Did you really think you could hide from me forever among these ordinary mortals?" Elena felt rage building within her, not just at the threat to her adopted family, but at the revelation that this monster had murdered the parents she had never known. "You're wrong about one thing, Malachar," she replied, her voice ringing with power that made the very stones of the palace vibrate. "I'm not hiding anymore." She raised both hands, and the pendant around her neck exploded with such brilliant silver light that it temporarily blinded everyone in the hall. When the radiance faded, Elena stood transformed, wearing robes of starlight and silver, with a crown of living branches and stars upon her head. The power of Etheresia flowed through her fully now, no longer constrained by years of suppression and denial. The battle that followed was like nothing the mortal realm had ever witnessed. Elena's magic clashed with Malachar's darkness in displays of power that shook the very foundations of the palace. Trees erupted from the marble floors at her command, their branches reaching toward the ceiling as their leaves glowed within her light. Waterfalls cascaded from nowhere, their pure waters driving back the shadow creatures that served the dark sorcerer. Marcus fought alongside his adoptive father, both men wielding weapons that proved to be more than merely ceremonial. Isabella revealed herself to be far more than just a queen, as she wove protective spells that shielded the innocent while allowing Elena's power to flow freely. The royal family of Eldermont had been keeping their own secrets, it seemed, preparing for this day even as they hoped it would never come. But Elena could sense that Malachar was not fighting at full strength. This was a test, a way to gauge her abilities before committing to total war. "Impressive, little princess," he said as he deflected one of her attacks with casual ease. "You have grown into your power more quickly than I anticipated. But you are still untrained, still soft from your years among these mortals. When next we meet, I will come with my full army, and neither you nor your precious adopted kingdom will survive." With those words, he dissolved into shadow, taking his remaining servants with him. The palace fell suddenly, quiet except for the sound of Elena's heavy breathing and the distant sobs of frightened guests. She stood in the center of the destroyed great hall, still glowing with silver light, surrounded by the wreckage of her former life. King Edmund approached her carefully, his own magical sword now dimmed to a faint glow. "Elena, are you all right? Can you hear me?" His voice was gentle, but she could sense his amazement at what she had become. Elena nodded slowly, feeling the power within her gradually settling into something she could control.
I'm fine, father. Better than fine, actually. I understand now what I need to do.
She looked around at her family, these people who had loved and protected her even when they knew it would lead to this moment.
But I can't do it from here.
Malachar was right about one thing: I am untrained, and if he returns with his full power, I won't be strong enough to stop him.
Isabella stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. You're going to leave us, aren't you? You're going to go to this Etheresia place and learn to be the queen you were born to be.
It wasn't really a question, they all knew what Elena's choice had to be.
I have to, Elena replied, her voice breaking with emotion. But this isn't goodbye forever.
Once I've learned to use my abilities properly, once I've reclaimed my birth kingdom and defeated Malachar, I'll find a way to return.
You're my family, the people who raised me and loved me. Nothing will ever change that.
Marcus stepped forward, his earlier jealousy and fear replaced by admiration and determination.
Then, we'll be waiting for you.
And if you need our help, if this war threatens both our kingdoms, you know where to find us.
He gestured to their father's glowing sword. Our family has been guardians of ancient magic longer than anyone knows.
We've been preparing for this day whether we realized it or not. As dawn broke over the damaged palace, Elena made her preparations to leave the only home she had ever known. The wooden box that had started everything sat on her dressing table, and she carefully placed the letter from her birth mother back inside it. This box would stay here, a reminder to her adopted family of the love that connected them across worlds and bloodlines. Standing at her bedroom window, looking out over the kingdom she had grown up in, Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just Princess Elena of Eldermont, she was Queen Lyreliai's daughter, heir to a magical kingdom and the only hope of stopping a war that had been brewing for 25 years. The scared young woman who had opened a wooden box the night before was gone, replaced by someone ready to embrace a destiny she had never chosen but would face with courage. Her 25th birthday had indeed changed everything, just as she had sensed it would. As she prepared to step into a larger world filled with magic and danger, Elena carried with her the love of the family who had raised her and the promise that someday, when peace was restored to both kingdoms, she would return home. The real adventure was just beginning, and she would face it as both the lost princess of Etheresia and the beloved daughter of Eldermont, united in one extraordinary young woman ready to change the world.